Animaniacs! So I had a lot of fun making the song version of my worst to best list this year, but as I predicted, and also sort of glad to hear that a lot of people miss not only me talking about it in detail, but talking about the lesser known animated films of the year. So I decided to do one last run of last year. Keep in mind this still isn't every movie released from last year, because there was like 100, and also that these aren't in any order, they're just movies I want to talk about. So let's start with the easily most requested one. There's a reason why Anomalisa has become one of the most praised animated films of the year, and it's not just because it's the animated version of a film that probably would have gotten nominated anyway. You know, old white man problems. A film that has been so cleverly referred to as the most human film of the year. Haha, it's funny because they're not real people. But while to each his own on whether or not that's true, I can actually see where this conclusion came from. The animated details on the human characters are astounding. You can see the effort taken to have these characters move as realistically as possible. Their subtle gestures, the smallest changes in expression, minute details that we probably wouldn't have noticed if they were live actors, but because of the stop motion and the possibly purposeful Uncanny Valley effect, those human details are so much more highlighted. That and the dialogue is also extremely realistic, complete with awkward pauses and characters constantly repeating phrases, completing the illusion that the film is about painfully real human moments. Directed and written by Charlie Kaufman of Eternal Sunshine and Adaptation, the story follows Michael Stone, played by Lupin, spending a night in a hotel and the woman he meets there. Michael is a very lonely man who has problems connecting with people, and this is portrayed in a very interesting way with the animated medium. All of the characters he meets, male or female, have the exact same face and voice, including his wife and son and the old fling he tries to reconnect with. Then all of a sudden he hears a unique voice belonging to Lisa, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, and from that moment becomes infatuated with her. That's a very unique way of showing an instantaneous connection with someone, and also how frustratingly dull obligatory social interaction can be. I can definitely relate to this a bit. And this is what makes this very different from all the other older man feels his life rekindled through a connection with a younger woman movies, because it's taking an honest look at the man's thought process. The character of Lisa, for example, seems just like a boring regular girl, not your usual over-eccentric manic pixie dream girl, but you can understand how he feels that way about her. It also doesn't shy away from the possibility that this man's perception and intentions are probably not wholly innocent. There's a reason why this man is lonely, and it's not just because he's quiet and people don't understand him. So I recommend this film for those who appreciate these smaller character-centric movies. Also anyone who wants to see the world's most realistic awkward stupping scene. So let's go ahead and finish off the Oscar noms, and while we're at it, start our trip around the world, starting with The Boy in the World, from Brazil. You can tell already it's a very stylized movie, utilizing a childlike colored pencil medium which suits the general narrative of showing the world through the point of view of a young boy, who I'm told has this name, but I literally would not know that because this is another movie that uses no dialogue. The film follows the boy seeing his father leave and follows him on his journey to find him, and while following him from the small farm to the big city, he witnesses distorted depictions of what complicated adult issues might look like to a child. Initially, the story is pretty comprehensively linear, with just some stylistic choices, such as the visualization of a nostalgic sound that the boy carries with him, and goes into a couple of flashbacks. But as the movie goes on, it becomes a lot more abstractly dreamlike. From this, you can already tell that this film might not be for everyone. Surreal is definitely a word to use, but it's also still more linear than that word suggests. But aside from just being beautifully colorful with some spectacular music, there's a lot to unpack here about child psychology, not only in their method of perception and coping, but particularly seems to make a note that boys that lose their fathers never really stop being boys looking for their fathers. And now let's hop over to India for Khalil Gibram's The Prophet. Animation from India is not something I know a whole lot about, I just haven't had the chance. Aside from what I've seen so far has been gorgeous, and obviously no stranger to cel-shaded CGI. The same style that this film uses. It's not flawless, but I just miss humans being drawn this way. It's also not the only style that this film uses. The book this movie was based on did have a story, but was more used as a framing device for various of the author's philosophical essays. We experience the film through the eyes of a young mute girl named Amitra, witnessing her mother's employer Mustafa being deported back to his country. And along the way, he's stopped by several people and gives a number of monologues about various topics such as love, marriage, children, work, freedom, and death. And each of these segments is animated by a different director in a different style. So yes, this is more of a series of short films about philosophy than a narrative. Not that there isn't an interesting story to be told through the Prophet Mustafa, or that the interwoven sermon structure doesn't have a place, but the constant interruption can get grating after a while. But the short philosophical segments are beautifully animated, and the monologue themselves are really interesting and effective, especially in the way they're recited by the great Liam Neeson. You know, I wouldn't have taken him for a poet. And from this, you can really believe that this Lebanese-American philosopher's work was a favorite in 1960s counterculture. I especially love the segment on children, where he emphasizes against the parents' wishes that children are not born to be obedient little clones of their parents, and are their own person and experience life in their own way. The previous teacher says thank you. Even if I didn't really appreciate the imagery or the phrasing, that was just one step away from a woman's body as merely a vessel. Still, it's a very interesting, admirable work. And now let's go visit China, who also has a vast history of animation that, again, I don't know a terribly large amount about. Okay guys, I don't get paid nearly enough to make this my day job. I can't know the background to everything. But I do know that China has been doing animation since the beginning of film, and has so many small animation studios that for the past couple years it has been producing easily over 10 a year. However, even they admit that Chinese animation as a whole has lately been suffering from a lack of originality and quality, and yeah. I've only tried watching a couple, and I know they have so many, and I know it's just luck, but the ones I picked, I just couldn't get through. When you look at the bulk of the recent ones, you see some decent looking CGI works, but then you also have a couple of blatant Western ripoffs, and what look like a lot of kidified anime wannabes. This year, however, a Chinese animated film crushed the box office record for any animated film released in China ever, including ones imported from Hollywood. This was The Monkey King, Hero is Back, which, as some of you can already guess, stars the Monkey King, one of China's most famous mythological characters, which already has been the inspiration for many an anime, including some really long indie work that I doubt anybody's heard of. This character has already been the subject of many Chinese films, and this one is definitely a extremely Hollywoodized version of it, which some are not terribly thrilled about. A young boy finds the long-imprisoned Monkey King and follows him around in awe, but the Monkey King is extremely snarky and standoffish, going, "Oh darn kids, they sure are annoying. I'm definitely not gonna grow attached to you," as the film goes on, and yeah, you can guess where that goes. They even insert a Chinese pop song overlaying a montage. The animation is pretty decent, not super polished, but the action sequences are spectacular. And as a whole, it's actually kind of adorable. You know, in a completely cheesy, formulaic kind of way. Though that ending, man. Come on guys, fridge the child or not. But it is by far the most watchable animation that I've seen come out of China, which again, isn't saying a lot. No doubt there's probably a huge pile of hidden gems that I don't know about. But at the very least, this looks like the Chinese animation industry is starting to pick itself up, and I think... Okay, two questions. One, what the hell is this? And two, why aren't I watching it right now? Okay, I can look this up. It's coming out this year! This year is going to be awesome! But now let's round out this world tour by returning to a country that never fails to deliver something interesting and engaging. I'm looking at you, only country that seemed to like 9. Though this one is a multi-country collaboration by the director of Kung Fu Panda and initially created to be voiced in English. Okay. And since this year was apparently the year of rebooting cultural icons, for France it was The Little Prince, one of France's most famous children's books. This film, however, takes a very interesting approach to it. For those who haven't read it, The Little Prince also contains a lot of philosophical anecdotes, though these are actually woven into the narrative. The first several of which have a theme of the child versus the adult. And this film opens with a girl being raised in a strict household with her mother's intention to turn her into a proper adult. But then she makes friends with the strange, eccentric man next door who is the aviator and writer of The Little Prince. Okay, just to clarify that the little girl is not in the Little Prince book. Also, none of the characters in the book or the movie have proper names. And the movie cuts between the story of the prince and the little girl's reaction to the story. And in a nutshell, this movie is incredibly good. I love it. Probably having a lot to do with the director, but it feels like a movie that could have come right out of a mainstream Western studio. If they didn't have to force a joke into every 10 seconds and were allowed to be more subtle subtle and metaphoric. While it does draw the lines between kids and adults in such a blatant, stark way, and maybe her transition from a mini adult to a playful kid is a little bit too easy, and maybe this whole lesson of keeping hold of your inner child isn't really one this generation has any problems with, there's still a lot of relatable, inspirational material here. I love the way she initially reacts to the story in a super literal way, which seems to echo how much fiction is judged that way recently. Also, this film approaches the concept of belief in a remarkably mature and tactful way that most Christmas Santa Claus films could only dream of. Then the last act suddenly takes a sharp left turn and takes on a vastly different tactic of reimagining the book. That's an interesting idea, but completely ruined because of how over-the-top spastic one character is written. Basically, no, not everything should have a sequel. But overall, I thought this movie was amazing. I easily would have put it at the same level as when Marnie was there. It's beautiful, it's touching, it gets these really complex ideas across in very relatable ways, and as someone who was prompted to read The Little Prince when I was really young, and didn't really get it, I appreciated that. So now you might be wondering, well, what about Japan? Surely some interesting movies came out of anime this year. And sure, like Marnie was there, which I already sang about, and called the girl Sasaki instead of Anna for some reason. But the truth is that aside from that and the usual truckload of movies tied into anime series, the ones I really wanted to see are not available yet, like The Boy and the Beast, directed by the same guy who did Wolf Children. But that'll be for 2016. However, one movie that did stick out in my mind was one called Hannah and Alice, a movie that looked like it was made with a combination of traditional rotoscope and cel-shaded CGI running on a really low frame rate. That illusion when it comes to movement at a distance is actually not bad when trying to create naturalistic movements on average, but some scenes are definitely better than others. And it also has a more natural take on the face, which again works as long as it's not right up against the camera. The story follows a girl who moves to a small town and then gets bombarded with an urban legend about a dead student who used to sit at her desk at school, complete with really weird exorcisms. And then meets a girl named Hannah, and together they try to uncover what really happened. This is a strikingly different approach to teenagers than I've seen from anime in a while. And like Anomalisa, its style can very much be described as realistic, though definitely with a bit more of a sense of humor. The teenagers aren't over-the-top giddy or emo, they just feel very naturally disillusioned, sarcastic but practical. The two girls feel like some of the most real girls that I've seen in anime for a long time. Their interactions with each other are so matter-of-fact and cheeky. Again, it's not over-the-top exciting, but there's an appeal to this sort of low-key, kooky realism. However, it does take a while for the film to get going, and in the meantime, it just feels like it's meandering. It's not an amazing movie, but aside from one moment where animation goes blah because someone is actually showing some emotion, it's actually very likable and engaging. So to close up, let's talk about a series of movies that I usually don't get a chance to talk about. DC's animated movies. DC's movies in theaters have been divisive at best, but they have been kicking ass in the animation department for a solid decade. If you haven't checked out any of their direct-to-video movies by now, you should definitely see Doom, and then decide if you want to see any more. I'm a particularly big fan of Public Enemies, Superman vs. the Elite, and Flashpoint Paradox. And I admit, that Suicide Squad movie is looking pretty good, but it still's got a long way to go before it can stand up to Assault on Arkham. Marvel does them too, but again, I haven't caught up with them because I'm just one person. But I hear that they're also really good. I did see Doctor Strange. I'm really excited for that movie. Anyway, in 2015, DC released 3 straight-to-video movies, the first of which was the Aquaman movie Throne of Atlantis. And honestly, it was just nice to see just because Aquaman is one of those very underrated, constantly parodied heroes. But on the other hand, ever since the movie War, DC Animation has been taking most of its inspiration from the rebooted New 52 universe, and frankly, I have not liked them very much. Everyone's always just so depressing and angry all the time. Throne of Atlantis is okay, it's certainly a lot better than War, but still, Aquaman and Flashpoint Paradox was more interesting than this Aquaman. Like I said, everyone's just so angry and all hate each other. These series used to be fun, man. The next one was Batman vs. Robin, and this one was a follow-up to another DC animated movie from 2014, Son of Batman. And that one I definitely didn't love, but it was still better than War. By all means, it was lovingly animated and had amazing action, as they all do. This was the one that revealed Damian Wayne as Batman's son from being taken advantage of by Talia al Ghul, because it's fine when it happens to a guy, right? Who then sort of lays him on him and then sucks off. And mincing no words about him, I hated Damian. He is a spoiled little bag. If you've never seen a true male Mary Sue and understand that Superman doesn't count, this is that kid. So overconfident and so amazing at what he does, he basically takes on all of his challengers and never needs Batman's help once. But he does get his ass kicked by Nightwing, which I loved. Anyway, back to 2015, Batman vs. Robin takes a much more level approach to their relationship, and it is by far better because Damian finally gets his overconfident, self-absorbed ass served to him. But Batman is also not guilty of tunnel vision, as he does what he feels is best for Damian by doing all of the things that would not logically work on a kid like him. The two basically end up on opposite sides of a battle against a secret organization in Gotham City, and it actually comes together really well. Like I said, this one has a much better approach to their relationship. But by far, the greatest DC movie that came out of last year was Gods and Monsters, an Elseworld story that reimagined the origins of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. And that's really hard to do for three of the most well-known characters in comic book history. And something that does not happen very often, this was a completely original story, not based on an already written comic book. The only problem I had with it was that at the beginning, I had no way of knowing what was set in the present and what was a flashback. Someone seriously needed to put in a fade or something. But aside from that, this movie was pretty freaking awesome. The movie reimagines Superman as the son of Zod, who was raised by a Mexican migrant, Batman as someone who actually has bat powers, and Wonder Woman as an alien. And how they all eventually started working together is anybody's guess, but the result is definitely the best of the DC movies of 2015. There you go, 2015 is done. Okay, one more thing. I usually don't do short films, but this Oscar nom World of Tomorrow is definitely one to check out. The digital memory of a woman somehow travels back in time to talk to herself as a child and tells her about the future. It's atmospheric, it's funny, it's clever, it's a short film that shows your inability to draw is no excuse for not making a great short film. Also, there's this one called The Present that is the quickest shift from this guy is the scum of the earth to duh that I've ever seen in my life. Okay, now I'm done. And now we all can look forward to next year. But before I go, I just wanted to restate how much I really love being able to experience all these different forms of animation and be able to share them with you guys. And you all have been so great and supportive. You know, except for that guy who told me to go kill myself because I don't love Pinkie Pie enough. Except that guy. Fuck that guy. But obviously I don't have the time to take a look at everything. Yeah, I've had to skimp a lot on anime lately. But I'd really love to be able to share more different kinds of animation with you guys and get videos out to you guys faster. So excuse me if I put my Patreon back in your face for a minute. Which, by the way, has been completely revamped. Let me tell you what you guys can get for pledging. If you pledge $1 per video, you get to see some of my videos early. If you pledge $3 per video, you can vote for what videos I do next. And if you pledge $5 per video, you get access to a monthly chat room with me, and we can talk about stuff. The next one, by the way, is going to be on Monday, March 14th at 7 p.m. Central. I'm gonna put a link in the Patreon page. And again, thank you all so much for your support in whatever form you want to give it in, and I'll see you all at Boy and the Beast in Gravity Falls.